Go from demure to dramatic. It's easy with a pencil.
If you were a teen in the 1970s, the mall wasn't just a place to shop. It was a place to practice being older than you were. And nowhere did that matter more than the beauty counters. These weren't casual stops. These were thresholds. You didn't rush up to them the way adults did. You approached slowly, pretending you were just browsing, hoping no one noticed how much this moment mattered to you. Today we're talking about the beauty counters every 1970s teen made a beeline for, not because of what they bought, but because of how standing there made them feel. Number 1. The counter that felt the most adult.
This is the Estee Lauder woman. One of the things that gives her such style is that she wears white linen with black taffeta. White linen. The crisp, refreshing fragrance from Estee Lauder.
This was the counter you noticed first, even from a distance. It looked calmer than the others, cleaner, more serious. The lighting felt softer, the displays more intentional. Nothing was loud or playful here. This was where grown women stood, unhurried, confident, already knowing what they liked. You didn't rush up to this counter. You approached it, slowly. Number 2. The one with the most testers.
Eye writing is here from Maybelline. The easy way to write eyes as unique as your signature. Maybelline Eye Color Styler Pencils.
Invent. Have fun.
Line, shadow, contour, and style.
This was the counter that invited touch. Little glass bottles already smudged with fingerprints, lipsticks rounded at the tip, powder compacts dusted and imperfect, mirrors tilted just enough to catch your face when you leaned in. No one rushed you away. No one told you not to try. You could linger here, testing, blending, wiping your fingers on tissues that were already used by someone else. The testers weren't really about color. They were about possibility. This was where you imagined who you might become. A different shade of lipstick meant a different version of you. Bolder, softer, more confident, more grown. You didn't need permission to imagine. The testers were permission. For a few minutes, you weren't a kid passing time in a mall. You were someone making choices, someone allowed to experiment, someone who could stand in front of a mirror and think, maybe this is me. And when you walked away, hands faintly scented, fingers stained with color, you wiped off too quickly. You carried that imagined future with you, at least for a little while. Number 3. The counter. You approached slowly. Every mall had one beauty counter that felt different the moment you noticed it. The lighting was sharper. The displays looked more expensive. The saleswomen stood straighter. This was the counter that made you aware of yourself before you even reached it. You didn't walk up to it the way you did others. You drifted closer. You pretended to look at something nearby. You adjusted your hair. You waited for the right moment, when no one important was watching. Approaching this counter took courage. Saying, "I'm just looking," felt like a line you practiced in your head. Asking a question felt like crossing a boundary you weren't sure you were allowed to cross. Girls hovered here more than anywhere else. They watched how adults interacted with the saleswoman. They learned what confidence looked like by observation, not participation. Sometimes you never actually stepped up. You just stood close enough to feel the gravity of the space, then walked away. And even that felt like something. Like you'd tested your nerve. This counter taught a quiet lesson. Adulthood wasn't just about age. It was about knowing how to enter a space without apologizing for being there. Number 4. The saleswoman who watched you closely.
The first time I saw her, she was standing over there. There was something different about her. Something that made her stand out from the rest. I thought at first it was her skin. So soft, so fresh, so clean. But there was more.
At some beauty counters, the products didn't feel like the main thing. She did. The saleswoman stood just behind the display, perfectly put together, watching quietly. Her makeup was flawless. Her posture didn't shift. She seemed to know exactly who belonged there and who didn't. You felt her presence the second you stepped up. Every movement felt noticed. How you picked up a tester, how long you lingered, whether you wiped your fingers or not. Even the way you stood felt suddenly important. Her attention carried weight. If she spoke to you kindly, explained something, or asked what you were looking for, it felt like approval, like you'd passed a test you didn't know you were taking. If she didn't acknowledge you, or worse, corrected you, that moment stayed with you, not because it was cruel, but because it was defining. You learned quickly how much power lived behind that counter. For a lot of girls, this was the first time an adult stranger evaluated them, not as a child, but as a potential customer. Being taken seriously felt thrilling. Being dismissed felt personal. That saleswoman didn't just sell products, she quietly taught lessons about confidence, belonging, and how it felt to be seen, or not, in grown-up spaces. Number 5. The counter with the best packaging.
In the beginning, there is Love's Baby Soft. This Christmas, Love is Baby Soft, the fragrance for the moment of discovery.
Some counters drew you in before you even touched a product, simply because everything looked important. Boxes were heavier than expected. Compacts snapped shut with authority. Bottles were glass, not plastic, and felt cool in your hand. The colors were deliberate: gold, ivory, deep navy, soft blush. Nothing looked playful. Everything looked permanent. The packaging sold the fantasy before the product ever could. Owning something from this counter felt different because it looked different. You didn't tear the box open. You opened it carefully, like it mattered. At home, the container stayed long after the product was gone. Empty compacts were kept in drawers. Bottles were lined up on dressers. Boxes were tucked away instead of thrown out. Because the packaging wasn't just a container, it was proof. Proof that you'd been there. That you'd crossed into a space that felt grown up and come back with something tangible. Even now, the memory of that packaging can feel more vivid than what was inside it. I tell these stories for the people who remember walking slowly past those counters, pretending not to care, while secretly caring very much. And if this kind of nostalgia speaks to you, make sure you're following right here on YouTube and Facebook. Number 6. The one you only visited on special trips. This counter wasn't part of your usual mall wandering. You didn't drift over to it with friends or stop there just to look. You went here when the trip itself already felt important, shopping with your mother, an aunt, or another adult who had real money and a reason to spend it. Sometimes it was tied to an occasion, a birthday coming up, a holiday, a dance, or just one of those rare days when an adult said, "You can pick something." Because you knew this wasn't casual, you behaved differently. You stood up straighter. You touched things more carefully. You waited to be invited before testing anything. The saleswoman spoke mostly to the adult, but you listened closely, absorbing every word. When something was chosen, it felt earned, not just because of the cost, but because of the moment. It marked time. You could remember exactly when and why you got it. At home, using that product felt like revisiting the day itself. It wasn't everyday makeup, it was special occasion makeup, worn sparingly, saved for moments that felt just as important as the trip when it was bought. And years later, it's often those counters, the ones you visited the least, that you remember the most clearly. Number 7. The counter you copied from older girls.
Here I am, feeling free. No one else I'd rather be. Just call me Maxine. I'm outrageous. I'm the most. They call my name from coast to coast.
This wasn't a counter you discovered on your own. You didn't research it or ask about it. You went because they went there. The older girls from school, the ones who walked faster, laughed louder, and seemed to already know the rules. You noticed where they stood, how long they lingered, which saleswomen they spoke to like old friends. You learned the counter before you ever approached it yourself. In the 70s, nobody explained beauty rules out loud. You learned by watching. If the older girls gathered here, it meant this counter was safe, acceptable, and approved by some invisible hierarchy you didn't yet understand.
Oh, baby, you never blushed so beautiful before.
Now there's a whole new beautiful kind of blush invented by Revlon. Young Blush Cream Powder Cheek Color. Half cream for pure, vibrant color. Half powder for long-lasting wear.
Copying wasn't about imitation. It was about survival. Standing at the same counter made you feel closer to where you wanted to be, even if you didn't say a word or touch a thing. Years later, you might not remember what you bought there, but you remember the feeling of standing nearby, pretending not to watch, quietly taking notes. Number 8. The counter that let you feel seen.
There's a fragrance that's here today, and they call it Charlie. A different fragrance that thinks your way, yeah, they call it Charlie.
This counter felt different the moment you approached it. The saleswoman looked at you, not past you, not over you, but directly at you. She didn't ask where your mother was. She didn't talk down. She spoke as if you belonged there. For a teenager, that alone was shocking. Being taken seriously changed everything. It made you stand taller. Ask a question. Admit you didn't know something. You weren't just a kid killing time. You were a customer, even if you didn't buy anything. That recognition lingered. You left feeling legitimate, as if the mall itself had quietly acknowledged you. And once you'd felt that, you chased it again. Not the products, but the respect. For a lot of girls, that was the first place outside the home or school where an adult treated them like someone becoming, not someone waiting. Number 9. The counter. You return to. Again and again.
Now, for great kisses, Maybelline introduces Fresh and Lovely Kissing Potion. Flavored roll-on lip gloss. Shines up lips or lipstick. Outshines pot gloss and stick gloss by a smile.
This was your safe place. You knew where everything was. You knew which tester was always empty and which one somehow never was. You knew which saleswoman worked which days. In a loud, crowded mall, this counter felt familiar, predictable, yours. Returning here wasn't about shopping. It was about grounding yourself in a space that felt known. And before you go, we'd really love to hear from you. Which counter did you make a beeline for? Was it the one that intimidated you? The one you only visited with your mom? Or the one where a saleswoman made you feel seen for the first time? Tell me in the comments, even if it's just a sentence. These stories don't really come alive until they're shared. And when you read through the comments, you'll probably see pieces of your own memories reflected back at you by someone else. That's the best part of this space. We remember together. Number 10. The counter that made you feel changed. This was the one you remembered years later, not necessarily because of what you bought, but because of how you felt leaving. Something shifted, something settled, something began. You walked out of the department store slightly different than when you walked in, more aware, more confident, more yourself, or closer to the version you were becoming, and even decades later, that feeling still lingers. Those beauty counters weren't just places to buy makeup. They were places to pause, imagine, and grow, quietly, carefully, one tester at a time. If you remember a counter like this, I'd love to hear about it.